Hi everyone, I'm Bridget, and if you're like me, you're at the tail end of your licensed mental health counseling program, and it's time to take the CPCE, the comprehensive exam that allows you to graduate from any CACREP accredited institution. And because there's not an official study guide, there have been a lot of books that have been written about this. And so I think I bought all of them. And so I figured I'd give you a critique of each one of the CPCE test study prep books. And just to remind you, so there are 8 content areas, and the 8 content areas make up 20 questions each on the CPCE. And of those, you get 17 graded because they use it in a bank for future. So 20 possible questions, of which 17 are graded, and then you get a score out of 136. And so that 4-hour exam of the 160 questions, of which you're graded on 136, takes up a significant amount of time. And if you don't know much about it, check out my other video. It kind of gives you some tips and tricks. But I wanted to go through 4 books. One is the New Stone book. This is the one that has the stones on it, the New Stone book. The second one is the Mometrics book. So this is the Mometrics book. The third is often called the Helwig book. This is the study guide for the CPCE. And then the fourth is called the Encyclopedia, the Purple Bible, and things like that. And that's by Rosenthal. So in a slightly particular order from least to most liked, I will give you a review. So this says NCE Prep. And if you notice, I specifically said CPCE. And that might be part of the reason why it just wasn't a good fit for me. So the pros of this book are you get 2 exams. It's relatively easy to read. It's got a nice big font. If you have older eyes, as I have older eyes, it's nice to have that. That's really, for me, the place where that kind of ends as being a positive thing. The first thing is it's not broken down into the 8 areas. This particular New Stone book goes into, they've organized it in 23 chapters, and it's not based on the content areas. So taking care of specially abled clients is something I think we should all be interested in, but that's part of a content area and it's not separated, but in here it is. So those were disconnects for me. I wanted 8 content areas, and they didn't have that. The other thing that I did not particularly like about this was it had no research and no assessment. And if you ask anybody who has taken the CPCE and even the NCE, they will tell you there's research and assessment in this. And so they do have an aspect, they do touch on it. But for example, if you're talking about counseling-based research, you're going to want to be able to talk about parametric and non-parametric measures. That's not mentioned in here. If you don't know how to use a t-test or a chi-square, that's not mentioned in here. If you want to be able to understand when to use a NOVA versus when to use a t-test, that's not in here. So that's not particularly helpful to me because most of the people I've talked to really want that assessment and research space because that's the thing that they're usually the most concerned about. And then the last thing, and it might seem picky after everything else, is no pictures. So you could possibly have an understanding of something. There are no pictures and no mnemonics. So this one wasn't a particular favorite of mine. Again, I bought the NCE one because at one point people kept saying NCE and CPCE are similar, and yet clearly I'm pointing out that they're not. So the second one, a friend of mine had the Mometrics and CPCE, so I bought the NCE. And many of the categories in this and that one were almost identical, including the research. So again, I think it's important to note that the information is similar, but slightly different. And I didn't get the impression from this that if I didn't understand an area, this was going to give me what I really needed to know. So let's talk about the pros. So the pros of this were it had 2 exams, and it was easy to read, and it was a big font. But the problem with the way these are bound is if you want to be able to pull them out and add them to different areas, as you can see, that was very difficult because I was trying to organize my thoughts a little bit better because they weren't in 8 content areas. So this one, again, also no illustrations, no mnemonics. It's just straight information. And the research is in here. But if you don't understand what the difference between a parametric and a non-parametric, or what it looks like, or understanding a positive skew or a negative skew, they'll tell you in words, but they're not necessarily going to show you. So that was tough for me because although I have done some statistics, I'm not a statistician. So again, probably one of the reasons why this wasn't a great fit for me. I also did the Tom Field, and I got a copy of the Tom Field, and as it's a prep, it's not included in here. But if you get a chance to take a prep, the Tom Field one is a pretty good one. This is the Helwig study guide, and I liked this for a lot of reasons. One, the way it was binded. So if I needed to take out one of the pages so that I could include it in the content I was creating, that was relatively easy to do. Again, also 2 practice exams, but you'd think with something like this, like with all of them, none of them have tabs on them. So you have to go and you have to find them. So you'll see I kind of did that myself, but all of them were missing that. So I like the way it was bound. I like the 2 practice exams. I like the fact that it was broken out into the 8 content areas and that it actually gave examples. That was really nice for me. I could have done more with illustrations, and if this is a study guide, give me mnemonics. So that actually brings us to a good segue point, because this does have positives and negatives to it. But if you look at taking the CPCE as an independent study group, as opposed to the way I started out looking at it, which is, why don't I know this? Which I kind of sort of did, but it hadn't been expressed quite that way. This is going to be very helpful for you. But beware, if you want someone to get to the point, this book is not that book. It doesn't get to the point quickly or easily. But it does have a lot of information. It does have mnemonics. It's actually very good about mnemonics. And it does have a really nice space here about boot camp. And it actually gives you some of the charts. So this, to me, although I did not like the folksy narrative, I really wanted to get straight to the point. I certainly understand why Howard Rosenthal wrote it the way he did. And if you think about it from that perspective, it's in fact a much better, if most of us are narrative based. So this one is a better fit than this one, because this one is just the facts. So I needed a little bit more just the facts in the Encyclopedia of Counseling and a little bit less of the folksy aspects. But I did like the mnemonics, and I did like the illustrations, and I did like the fact that he gave a little bit more in detail, because I thought that helped me create a timeline of what it was that I was taking an exam for. So here's a critique of each one of the CPCE, at least the major ones, test study books. Hope that's helpful. Good luck. I'm rooting for you.